Have you ever, looked at someone and wondered how they can eat whatever they want and seemingly not gain a pound, while you feel like you just look at a donut and your jeans get tighter?
Right.
It's like some people have this magical metabolism, and the rest of us are stuck with, well, whatever this is.
I hear you. It's definitely something a lot of people can relate to, that feeling of almost like unfairness, right? Like, why is it so easy for some and so difficult for others?
Totally. And today we're going to do a deep dive into that very question, but really get into the science of it. We're going to move way beyond just calories in, calories out.
Absolutely. And we've got some really interesting research here that digs deep into how our bodies actually regulate hunger and fat storage.
It's fascinating stuff. Really gets you thinking about how much more is going on beneath the surface. So for everyone listening, our goal today is to unpack this complex system so you can understand the factors at play and hopefully even use this knowledge to make more informed choices for your health and well-being.
Exactly, because it's not just about willpower, it's about understanding the intricate mechanisms that drive our hunger, our metabolism, and how our bodies store fat.
Okay, so let's start with something that's like a pretty fundamental part of this whole equation. Fat cells, or adipocytes as they're called scientifically.
Right.
Now, I remember hearing when I was younger that we stopped creating these fat cells after a certain age, like in childhood.
Right.
And I remember thinking, well, if that's true, then if you were a kid who struggled with weight, you're basically stuck with that disadvantage for life, right?
Right. That was kind of the prevailing thought for a while. But our understanding has evolved quite a bit since then. What we know now is that everyone, regardless of age, continues to create new fat cells throughout their lives.
Oh, interesting. So it's not that we stop making them entirely.
Nope. The real difference lies in the rate at which these new fat cells are created. Individuals who are overweight, for instance, tend to produce new fat cells at a much faster pace than those who maintain a healthy weight.
Huh. So even as adults, we're constantly generating new fat cells.
Pretty much. And here's the catch. Once those fat cells are created, they tend to stick around, even if you lose weight later on.
So even if you manage to lose a significant amount of fat, you still have the same number of fat cells.
Exactly. And those remaining fat cells have this inherent drive to, well, refill their energy stores.
Ah, so it's almost like they're just waiting to be filled up again.
In a way, yeah. And this is one of the main reasons why maintaining weight loss can be such a challenge. Your body essentially has a greater capacity for fat storage after you've gained weight, even if you lose it later.
That's kind of a bummer, to be honest.
I know, right? But thinking about it from a preventative standpoint, it really underscores how important it is to prevent weight gain in the first place, especially in childhood.
Right, because if you can minimize the number of fat cells you develop early on, you're potentially making things a lot easier for yourself down the road.
Absolutely. It's all about setting yourself up for long-term success.
Now, this next part was something that I gotta admit I hadn't really given much thought to before. The research we looked at talks about how a mother's nutrition during pregnancy can actually influence your tendency to develop body fat as an adult.
It's pretty fascinating, right?
It is. I mean, it makes sense that what a mother eats during pregnancy would impact the baby's development, but to think that it could have such long-lasting effects on, body fat regulation.
It's a powerful illustration of how significant those early developmental stages are.
Yeah. So basically, both insufficient nutrition and excessive nutrition during pregnancy can affect how the child's body develops fat stores later in life.
Right. And this has been observed in various studies, actually.
Wow. It's incredible how, even before we're born, things are being set in motion that can influence our health for years to come. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about those famous hunger hormones we always hear about. Leptin and ghrelin.
Yeah, those two are key players in this whole hunger game.
So leptin is the one that basically tells us when we're full, right?
Exactly. Think of leptin as a messenger that signals to your brain, letting it know that your energy stores, in the form of fat, are sufficient.
Okay, so it's like a little flag that goes up and says, hey, we're good here. No need to eat anymore.
Exactly. But here's the thing. This signaling pathway can be disrupted. For example, things like insulin and corticosteroids can lead to what's called leptin resistance.
Leptin resistance, what's that?
Basically, it means your brain becomes less sensitive to leptin signals. So even though your fat stores might be adequate, your brain doesn't quite get the memo and you still feel hungry.
Oh, so it's like leptin is trying to wave that we're full flag, but the brain is kind of ignoring it.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. And this can happen for various reasons, like chronic inflammation or consistently high levels of insulin in the blood.
So it's not just about how much leptin your body is producing, it's also about how well your brain is responding to it.
Precisely. And another really important factor to consider is that deficiencies in essential nutrients can also lower your leptin levels.
Really, so if I'm not getting enough of certain vitamins or minerals, my leptin levels could drop.
Exactly. And when that happens, your body might perceive it as a lack of resources, even if you're consuming enough calories overall. So it might drive you to eat more in an attempt to obtain those missing nutrients.
Huh. So making sure you're not deficient in essential nutrients isn't just about overall health. It could actually play a role in regulating your hunger hormones.
Absolutely. And this highlights the importance of a balanced and nutrient-rich diet. It's not just about calories, it's about providing your body with the building blocks it needs to function properly.
Right, because if your body's constantly sensing that it's missing something, it's going to keep sending those hunger signals until it gets what it needs.
Mm.
Okay, so that's leptin. What about ghrelin? What role does it play?
Ghrelin is often referred to as the hunger hormone, and for good reason. It's produced primarily in the stomach, and its levels tend to rise when your stomach is empty, signaling to your brain that it's time to eat.
So it's like the opposite of leptin ghrelin is the flag that goes up when the tank is running low.
Yeah, pretty much. And ghrelin levels typically decrease after you eat as your stomach fills up.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's this back and forth between leptin and ghrelin that helps regulate our appetite.
Exactly. And like leptin, ghrelin can also be influenced by various factors, including sleep, stress, and even exercise.
Speaking of sleep, the research we looked at mentions that leptin levels tend to naturally increase at night before we go to sleep.
Right. It seems to be a sort of protective mechanism to prevent us from overeating during those inactive hours.
Like a built-in system to help us avoid those late-night snacking sprees.
Exactly. And it's also tied to our circadian rhythm, that internal body clock that regulates our sleep-wake cycle.
So basically, our sleep patterns and our hunger hormones are interconnected.
Very much so. And this has implications for things like when you eat your meals, especially if you're someone who practices intermittent fasting or only eats one main meal per day.
Oh, right. So if leptin is naturally higher at night, it might make more sense to eat your main meal earlier in the day
Yeah.
rather than right before bed.
Exactly. This can help support those natural hormonal rhythms and might even contribute to better sleep quality.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
It really highlights how everything is interconnected. Now, this next part I found really interesting because it moves beyond just the purely physiological aspects of hunger.
Oh, yeah.
The research delves into the psychology of hunger and how our minds can actually influence how hungry we feel.
Mm.
It even suggests that we can feel hungry simply by expecting to be hungry.
It's amazing how powerful our minds are, right? And this really emphasizes that hunger isn't just a simple physical sensation triggered by an empty stomach.
Right. It's not just like a fuel gauge in our car that says, okay, we're low, time to fill up.
Hmm.
There's a lot more going on in our brains that can influence our perception of hunger.
Absolutely. And this is where things like expectations and memories come into play.
Memories, like memories of past meals.
Exactly. Our memories of previous meals can actually impact how satisfied we feel in the present moment.
So if I vividly remember having a huge, satisfying dinner last night, I might feel fuller for longer today, even if it was the same number of calories as several smaller meals that I barely remember eating.
Precisely. It's like our brains are referencing those past experiences to gauge how hungry we should be feeling right now. And this was actually demonstrated in a study back in 1998 that looked at the role of memory in hunger and satiety.
Wow, so our brains are kind of constantly comparing our current situation to our past experiences with food.
In a way, yeah. And this has some interesting implications for things like meal frequency.
How so?
Well, if you're someone who eats many small meals throughout the day, you might actually end up feeling more hungry overall compared to someone who eats fewer, larger meals, even if the total calorie intake is the same.
Really? But why is that?
Because if you're relying on the memory of your last meal to regulate your hunger, those smaller, more frequent meals might not leave as strong of a memory imprint. So your brain might be more likely to think, hey, it's been a while since we've eaten, let's get some food.
Huh. That's counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you think about it that way. Like, if those smaller meals aren't really registering in your memory, your brain might not be getting the memo that you've actually eaten recently.
Exactly. It's all about those memory associations. And this is where something like intermittent fasting can potentially be beneficial because those longer periods without food create a stronger memory of the last meal, which can help suppress those hunger pangs later on.
So it's like by consciously reminding yourself of that last meal, you're
Yeah.
sort of tricking your brain into thinking you're not actually starving.
In a way, yeah, and that can be a powerful tool for managing those cravings.
Okay, that's fascinating. So we've got fat cells, leptin, ghrelin, memories. And now let's talk about something called the set point theory, which I've heard mentioned before, but I don't really understand what it means.
Yeah, the set point theory is it's a really interesting concept, but it's important to note that it's still a theory, not a proven fact.
Okay, so it's more like a hypothesis at this
Right.
point,
But basically, the set point theory suggests that our bodies have a sort of predetermined weight range that they naturally gravitate towards.
like a built-in thermostat that tries to keep our weight within a certain range.
Exactly. And this set point is thought to be influenced by a combination of our genetics, our long-term eating habits, our activity levels, and other factors.
So it's like our bodies have this internal blueprint for what our weight should be.
In a way, yeah. And if we deviate too far from the set point, whether by gaining weight or losing weight, our body might initiate various mechanisms to try and bring us back to that equilibrium.
So if I try to lose a significant amount of weight and go below my set point, my body might fight back by increasing my hunger, slowing down my metabolism, or doing other things to try and get me back to that predetermined weight.
That's the idea behind the theory, yeah. And it's important to remember that this set point isn't necessarily fixed. It can change over time based on various factors like lifestyle changes or aging.
So it's not like we're doomed to stay at a certain weight forever.
No, not at all. But it does suggest that our bodies have this natural tendency to maintain a certain weight range.
Okay, that's good to know. And it also highlights the importance of finding a sustainable approach to weight management, one that doesn't involve constantly fighting against your body's natural inclinations.
Absolutely. It's about working with your body, not against it. Now, the research also touches upon something that's been getting a lot of attention in recent years, the gut microbiome.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The trillions of bacteria and other microorganisms that live in our digestive system, right?
Exactly. And, it's fascinating how much our gut health can actually influence our hunger and cravings.
Really? So those little bugs in our gut can actually make us feel hungrier?
It seems so. The bacteria in our gut produce various substances that can interact with our brains and influence things like appetite regulation.
So it's not just about what we're eating, it's also about what those bacteria in our gut are eating and what they're producing as a result.
Precisely. And different types of bacteria have different effects on our hunger hormones. For example, some bacteria are known to promote the production of ghrelin, the hunger hormone, while others might have the opposite effect and help suppress appetite.
So it's like a whole ecosystem in there.
Yeah.
And the balance of that ecosystem can influence how hungry we feel.
Exactly. And this is one of the reasons why taking care of your gut health is so important for overall well-being. It's not just about digestion, it's about influencing a whole cascade of processes in the body, including appetite regulation.
Wow. Okay, so we've got fat cells, hormones, memories, a set point, and now a whole microbiome influencing our hunger. It's amazing how complex this all is.
It really is. And speaking of complexity, let's talk a bit about protein.
Okay, now I know there's been a lot of talk lately about the potential benefits of lower protein intake for longevity.
Right, there's definitely some research pointing in that direction.
But the research we looked at seems to suggest that when it comes to hunger regulation, protein might actually be our friend.
Yeah, that's an important nuance. While the optimal amount of protein for longevity is still a bit of a debate, there's pretty strong evidence that protein plays a crucial role in managing hunger.
So even if we're getting enough calories from other sources, like carbs and fats, if we're not getting enough protein, we might still feel hungry.
Exactly. Our bodies need a certain amount of protein every day for things like building and repairing tissues, producing enzymes, and various other essential functions.
Right, it's not just for building muscles like a lot of people think.
Nope. Protein is involved in a huge range of processes in the body. And if we're not getting enough of it, our body has a way of letting us know.
By making us feel hungry?
Precisely. And here's something interesting. The foods that tend to be the most satiating, meaning they keep us feeling fuller for longer, are often those that are high in protein.
Like meat, eggs, dairy.
Exactly. And this makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Our ancestors, when they were lucky enough to hunt and kill an animal, they would feast on the protein-rich parts first, because those were the most valuable from a nutritional standpoint.
And that would keep them feeling full and energized for longer, which was crucial for survival.
Right. So this inherent drive to seek out protein-rich foods is kind of ingrained in our biology.
So the takeaway here is that if we want to manage our hunger effectively, making sure we're getting enough protein is key.
Absolutely. And prioritizing those high satiety foods, especially earlier in the meal, can make a big difference.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now let's delve into the role of our nervous system in this whole hunger equation. The research mentions that certain neurotransmitters, like serotonin, play a role in making us feel satisfied after eating.
Right, serotonin is often associated with mood regulation, but it's also involved in appetite control.
So if our serotonin levels are low, we might not feel as satisfied after eating, even if we've eaten a lot of food.
Exactly. And this might lead to overeating in an attempt to achieve that feeling of fullness and satisfaction.
So it's not just about filling our stomachs, it's also about satisfying those neurochemical pathways in our brains.
Precisely. And it turns out that our bodies have some pretty remarkable built-in mechanisms to prevent us from overeating, beyond just those hunger hormones.
Really? Like what?
Well, for instance, we have certain limits on how much of certain nutrients we can actually absorb and utilize at one time.
Oh, interesting. So even if we eat a huge amount of food, our body might not be able to process all of those nutrients at once.
Exactly. There's a sort of ceiling on how much we can absorb, especially for things like essential fatty acids. And this helps prevent us from overdoing it on certain nutrients, even if we're eating a lot of calories.
Huh, that's pretty cool. So our bodies are kind of smarter than we give them credit for.
Absolutely. And then we have other mechanisms, like the release of certain hormones that help regulate our appetite.
Like cholecystokinin or CCK, which the research mentions.
Right, CCK is released from the small intestine in response to feed intake, and it plays a role in both digestion and appetite suppression.
So it helps us digest our food and tells us when we've had enough.
Yeah, pretty much. It's all part of this intricate feedback loop that our bodies use to regulate energy intake.
And it reinforces the idea that our bodies will eat until they've met their requirements for various nutrients, not just overall calories, right?
Exactly. So if we're deficient in something like essential amino acids or essential fats, our appetite might stay elevated until those needs are fulfilled.
So it's not just about hitting a certain calorie number. It's about providing our bodies with the specific building blocks they need.
Precisely. And this is where something like targeted supplementation can sometimes be helpful because it can help address those underlying deficiencies and potentially reduce overall appetite as a result.
Now, the research also mentions something called the second brain, which sounds kind of sci-fi.
I know, right? But it's actually a term that's used to describe the complex network of nerves in our gut, which is so extensive that it's often referred to as our second brain.
So it's like a whole separate nervous system down there in our digestive system.
In a way, yeah. And this second brain communicates with our main brain via the vagus nerve, which is this long nerve that runs from the brainstem down to the abdomen.
Okay, so our gut and our brain are constantly talking to each other.
All the time. And one of the ways they communicate is through the sensation of fullness.
Like when we eat a big meal and our stomach stretches.
Exactly. That stretching of the stomach actually sends signals along the vagus nerve to the brain, which helps to inhibit hunger.
So it's like a built-in safety mechanism to prevent us from overeating.
You could think of it that way. And this is one of the reasons why eating high-volume foods like those rich in soluble fiber can be helpful for managing hunger.
Because they take up more space in our stomach and trigger that feeling of fullness sooner.
Exactly. And there are other ways to stimulate the vagus nerve, like certain breathing techniques or even things like cold exposure, which can help regulate hunger and promote a sense of calm and relaxation.
It's amazing to think that something as simple as deep breathing could actually influence our hunger hormones.
It really is. It speaks to the interconnectedness of our bodies and how everything is ultimately working together. Now, let's dive into some practical strategies we can use to actually apply this knowledge and better regulate our hunger in everyday life.
Awesome, let's do it. Because knowing all this stuff is great, but it's even better if we can actually use it to improve our health and well-being.
Absolutely. So let's start with some strategies for improving leptin sensitivity.
Okay?
One of the biggest culprits when it comes to leptin resistance is fructose, especially in the form of high fructose corn syrup, which is found in so many processed foods and sugary drinks.
Right, I've heard that high fructose corn syrup is particularly bad for our metabolism.
It is. And one of the reasons is that it can interfere with the way our bodies process and utilize fat, which can contribute to leptin resistance over time.
So step one, Cut back on the sugary drinks and processed foods.
Exactly. Now, exercise is also really important for improving leptin sensitivity.
Of course, but what kind of exercise?
Well, the key is to find activities that don't cause excessive stress on the body.
Stress on the body.
Right. When we exercise too intensely or for too long, our bodies release cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And while cortisol is important for various functions, chronically elevated levels can actually contribute to leptin resistance.
Huh. So it's not just about how many calories we burn during exercise. It's also about the type of exercise we're doing and how our bodies are responding to it.
Exactly. So finding activities that you enjoy that don't feel overly strenuous and that allow you to recover properly is key.
Okay, so things like walking, swimming, yoga, maybe some moderate intensity strength training.
Those are all great options. And speaking of stress, managing stress levels in general is also really important for maintaining healthy leptin sensitivity.
Right, because stress is pretty much unavoidable in modern life, but it's how we manage it that makes all the difference.
Exactly. So finding healthy coping mechanisms, whether it's meditation, spending time in nature, journaling, or whatever works for you, can really help keep those cortisol levels in check.
Okay, good to know. Now, what about cold exposure? The research mentions that can be beneficial for leptin sensitivity.
It can. Exposing your body to cold temperatures, even for short periods, can stimulate the conversion of white fat, which is the type of fat that primarily stores energy, into brown fat.
Brown fat, I thought all fat was bad.
Well, brown fat is actually a good kind of fat. It's more metabolically active and burns calories for heat.
So it's like a tiny furnace in our bodies.
You could think of it that way. And this conversion of white fat to brown fat has been shown to have positive effects on leptin levels.
So taking cold showers or going for a swim in a cold lake could actually help improve our leptin sensitivity.
It could. And you don't have to do anything extreme. Even just a few minutes of cold exposure can make a difference over time.
Okay, so that's leptin sensitivity. What about intermittent fasting? It seems like everyone's talking about that these days.
It is a popular topic, and for good reason. Intermittent fasting has been shown to have a number of potential health benefits, including improved insulin sensitivity and reduced inflammation.
And it can also help with hunger regulation.
It can. One of the ways it does this is by influencing our hunger hormones.
So basically, by going for extended periods without food, we're sort of resetting our hunger signals.
In a way, yeah. When we fast, our ghrelin levels, those hunger signals, tend to decrease over time, so we become less sensitive to those hunger pangs.
That makes sense. But I imagine those first few days or weeks of intermittent fasting must be pretty tough.
It can be. You might feel hungrier than usual at first, but over time, your body adapts, and those hunger pangs become less intense and less frequent.
So it's kind of like training your body to be less reliant on those constant food cues.
Exactly. And this can be really helpful for breaking those unhealthy snacking habits and getting more in tune with your body's natural hunger signals.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
And what about varying our meal times? The research mentions that can be beneficial.
It can. When we eat at the same time every day, our bodies start to anticipate those meals and release hormones accordingly.
So like clockwork, our bodies are getting ready for food at those specific times.
Right. And this can sometimes lead to increased hunger and cravings around those meal times.
Huh. So if we mix things up a bit and eat at different times each day, we might be able to prevent those anticipatory spikes in hunger.
Exactly. It's all about keeping your body guessing a little bit.
And I imagine this could also help break those mindless eating habits where we just eat out of habit or because it's a certain time of day.
Absolutely. It's about becoming more mindful of our eating patterns and really tuning into those true hunger signals.
Now, this next one seems pretty obvious, but the research emphasizes the importance of eliminating hunger triggers.
Right. This is about setting yourself up for success by creating an environment that supports your goals.
So like getting rid of all the junk food in the house.
Exactly. If it's not there, you're less likely to eat it.
Simple, but effective. And it's not just about food in the house, right? It's also about those external triggers, like driving past our favorite fast food place on the way home from work.
Absolutely. If you know that certain places or situations trigger those cravings, try to find ways to avoid them or at least minimize your exposure to them.
So like taking a different route home from work or finding a new coffee shop that doesn't have those tempting pastries on display.
Exactly. It's about being proactive and making conscious choices that support your goals.
Okay, and finally, the research highlights the importance of prioritizing fiber and protein before carbohydrates in our meals.
This is a really interesting strategy that leverages a few of the mechanisms we've talked about.
So basically, we start our meal with fiber, then protein, and then carbs.
Exactly. And there are a few reasons why this can be beneficial. First, fiber helps to create a sense of fullness in the stomach. It absorbs water and expands, which stretches the stomach and triggers those satiety signals to the brain.
So we feel fuller sooner, which can help prevent overeating.
Right. And then following that with protein helps to further increase satiety and also provides the building blocks our bodies need for various functions.
And this also helps stabilize blood sugar levels, which can prevent those energy crashes and cravings later on.
Exactly. And by saving the carbohydrates for last, we're essentially giving our bodies time to register fullness and meet those protein needs before we hit them with those more readily digestible carbs.
It's like a strategic sequencing of our food intake to optimize our hunger hormones and energy levels.
Precisely. And the research even suggests a specific strategy. Try eating your meat and salad first, and then wait at least 20 minutes before adding any carbohydrates to your plate.
So we give our bodies a chance to catch up and really register those satiety signals before we move on to the next course.
Exactly. And this can make a big difference in how much we eat overall and how satisfied we feel after the meal.
Wow. So we've covered a lot of ground today, from fat cells to hormones to memories to gut bacteria to neurotransmitters and even the vagus nerve. It's amazing to think that something as seemingly simple as hunger is actually influenced by such a complex web of factors.
It really is. And it highlights the importance of taking a holistic approach to our health and well-being.
Right. It's not just about counting calories or following the latest fad diet. It's about understanding the intricate mechanisms that drive our hunger and working with our bodies to achieve our goals.
Exactly. And by gaining a deeper understanding of these mechanisms, we can make more informed choices that support our health, our energy levels, and our overall sense of well-being.
And hopefully this deep dive has given you, the listener, a new appreciation for the incredible complexity of your body and the amazing ways it works to keep you alive and thriving.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder what other seemingly simple bodily functions might actually be governed by equally complex and fascinating processes. It really opens up a whole new world of exploration and discovery within ourselves.
It really does. So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep exploring the amazing world within your own body.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Until next time.